Welcome back, my friends. Pull up a chair. We're here on the back porch for a little while. A Memorial Day special from the Back Porch Rocking Chair. The draft, the fear, and the uniform. Today's story is a little different. Usually around this old rocking chair, we laugh a little, we remember old times, and talk about growing up in a simpler America. But for this day, a special day, we remember. This Memorial Day, I want to honor the men and the women who served this country, especially those who never made it back home. And I also want to take you back to a time when thousands of young American boys, just teenagers really, suddenly found themselves facing a future they never expected. You see, back in the mid-1960s, the Vietnam War was no longer something happening somewhere far away on the evening news. It was becoming personal. Very personal. The draft lottery changed everything. One number, one envelope, one phone call could completely change your life overnight. And for many of us, that was the first moment we truly understood what sacrifice, duty, fear, and patriotism really meant. So, from this old back porch rocking chair, let me tell you about my own unique military experience and what it felt like being a teenager when America was calling and you never knew through the lottery when your number was coming up. You have to remember, most of us were just kids. We were driving old cars, hanging out at football games, drinking milkshakes, going on dates, worrying about school and jobs and whether we had enough gas to make it through the weekend. And then suddenly, Vietnam entered the conversation. Everywhere. At church, at school, at the barber shop, and yes, even around the supper table. And it was on television every single night. Mothers were worried, fathers got quiet, and teenage boys started wondering, what happens? What happens if my number gets called? Well, you see, some like me that had just graduated from high school, we had our whole life planned out. College, vocations of various types, doctors, lawyers, a future. Well, things were a little different. Now, very true, some young men enlisted voluntarily. Some were drafted. And some tried to avoid the draft and avoid service altogether. And some proudly stepped forward because they believed serving their country was simply the right thing to do. Well, somewhere in the middle of all of that, Uncle Sam and I crossed paths. Now, my military story was a little different than many others. In 1965, the Navy had a special program called the 85-Day Accelerated Training Program. It was designed to quickly train young reservists during a time when military manpower was in high demand because of Vietnam. And somehow this country boy from Georgia found himself right in the middle of it. But before I tell you about my experience during all of this, let me give you a few facts. President Lyndon Johnson deployed 190,000 military personnel to Vietnam, and approximately 400,000 the following year. These deployments increased the demand for U.S. personnel, and it ultimately led to the first Vietnam draft. Between 1965 and 1973, over 1.7 million men were drafted. Around 648,500 draftees, or 38% of the number that served in Vietnam, comprising about a quarter of the U.S. forces deployed to the country. And of that, 17,725 draftees died. Just over 30% of all American combat deaths during the war. And in 1965, the U.S. Navy Reserve began and operated the 85-day Accelerated Training Program, also known as the 2x6 program. The special program combines basic recruit training, boot camp, an initial technical aviation A school, into an intensive 85-day active duty block for high school seniors and young enlistees that were just kind of waiting on the outside as to seeing what was going to take place. At that time also, Naval Air Station Atlanta, NAS, operated from 1959 to 2009 in Marietta, Georgia, where I lived. The base served as a massive hub for the Naval Air Reserve, preserving readiness training and logistical support for reserve aviation and flight units. Okay, enough technical stuff. Here's my story. I did not want to get drafted. I did not want to take a chance at the lottery and being assigned to either the Army, the Marines, the Navy, or any other branch of the military. Now notice, I said assigned. I was always kind of bullheaded about those things. If I was going to serve, I wanted it to be in the branch of the military. You know, it's hard to say. I think of the U.S. military as just being a strong force, but they are branches. And I wanted it to be my choice as to where and how I serve, not someone else's. So when I saw the special article in the Marietta Daily Journal telling of the special 85-day program, I said, wow, now that's for me. And I went and tried to sign up. The list was already long, and there was a limit of how many enrollees they would take. And I was told, sorry, guess you'll just have to see if your lottery number comes up, son. Well, that's not what I wanted to hear. So I went home, depressed, concerned, and well, let me tell it like it was. I was mad. What am I going to do? I do not want to be drafted. And every night when we watch TV and they draw those numbers out in that lottery, I didn't want my number to come up. What am I going to do now? And this was the choice and the circumstance and the thing that so many young boys my age, my friends, were facing. So I went to my room and slammed the door. I don't know why we like to do things like that. We slammed the door. What am I going to do? But later that night, about 10:30 p.m., the phone rang. My dad, he had answered and he says, Bobby Ray, somebody's on the phone for you. Well, I got a phone call from the recruiter that I had talked to earlier. and he asked if I was really interested in being a part of the 85-day program. I said, "You bet your life I am." And he said, "Well, son, here's what you need to do. Get your dad, get your birth certificate, and get your butt down to the recruiting office before 11 o'clock. You hear me?" Well, I won't go into the details of how frantic everything was at our house, getting those things together and out the door and down to the recruiting office on time to get sworn in. But there I was in the room with all the other recruits, their parents, and a lot of military brass standing at the front of the room, all smiling, all talking with each person as we came in. And then finally, they said, "All you recruits, to the front. Line up. Parents, to the back." The recruiter came to the front and he said, "Gentlemen, stand at attention. Raise your right hand and repeat after me." Well, everything had happened in such a big hurry, and it was just all a big blur. And everyone repeated the words that was said, and then all of a sudden, we all said, "So help me God." And things changed. Instead of smiles and pleasant words and congratulations, we were told to, "Recruits, eyes front, right face." And they marched us guys out of the room to begin the process of signing papers, getting sizes recorded, and told to report to the back of the area for a physical. None of us were really prepared for this. In the meantime, they told our parents to just take a seat, and the process was explained to them while we were being put through our very first minutes of becoming a bona fide member of the United States military. Well, on June the 11th, 1965, at approximately 11:10, my life as I had known it was changed. And when all was said and done, I left the recruiting office with my dad, with orders in my hand telling me to report for training 8 a.m. Monday morning, June the 14th, 1965, at NAS Atlanta. Take a breath. You need some tea? Need to rock for just a second here. You see, from that point, I was no longer Bobby Ray Autry. I was quickly told from that moment forward, I would be known as Autry, a maggot belonging to a maggot squad, Squad A. And every part of my maggot existence was at the pleasure of Sergeant Major Harrison. But from that second forward, to be only called and known as Sergeant Major. Well, we all went to get our clothes, our duffel bags. They gave that to us to put said clothes into. And at that point was informed we only needed to have on our boots, our socks, our underwear, and a t-shirt. Everything else into the duffel bag. Once we all got the bags and was there, Sergeant Major said, "Duffel bags over your head, boys." And as a unit, we ran with the duffel bags over our heads, in our underwear and a t-shirt, with boots and socks on, to the medical facility to get our required shots. Immediately followed by running from the medical facilities to our assigned barracks. And there were our bunks. Showers, foot lockers, beds, and told, "Get it together, maggots. Ready for inspection." Wow, gosh, things were changing. Well, all of this made up the first portion of our morning. Then it came time for our squads to fall in on the parade grounds. And it was then that I found out that based on test scores, the physical exams, and the recommendations of the recruiters, Maggot Autry was assigned as Maggot Squad A leader. And the other two squads, they got theirs. Now, that may not seem like much, but as I was soon to find out exactly what being a Maggot Squad leader for Squad A was all about. Well, I found out fairly quickly. It meant I didn't have to polish my own shoes. I didn't have to hand wash my uniforms. I didn't have to pull mess hall duty. Now listen, to a teenage boy in basic training, that sounded mighty close to heaven. I know that all of the other young men and ladies that have gone now through basic training will come to appreciate what you went through thinking, what? Well, I've got to just tell you about what happened to me. While everybody else was scrubbing floors, cleaning pots, I suddenly discovered military leadership had its advantages. Now, yeah, there was a lot of classes we had to go to. We had a lot of physical exercises, cross-country running in regular military uniforms, as well as full battle-ready military uniforms. A lot of weight to have to run with. Guess what? We did this in the mornings. We did it in the afternoons. And we never knew when the sergeant major would want us to do it in the middle of the night. We ran to class. We ran to mess hall for all of our meals. We ran to the parade grounds where we would then have to march around the parade grounds all together. Up, 1, 2, 3, 4. Up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and all those kind of things. But I got to be the squad leader, and I was out front. Well, we got to stand at attention in the sun. We got to march in the sun. And wow, if a rainstorm came, we had the privilege of doing it all over again, just to be sure we could. Now, as Maggot Squad A leader, I had special administrative duties that kept me from having to do certain classes or do certain standard duties, as I mentioned. So instead of polishing my shoes or washing my clothes in a bucket or figuring out how to military press our dress uniforms, get this now, gotta remember, I'm from Marietta. My boot camp was taking place at NAS Atlanta, which is located where? Dobbins Air Force Base. Where? Marietta, Georgia. So, I got Patsy, or my mom, to come to the base, pick up my stuff, and take it to the shoe shop for polishing, the laundry for taking care of the uniforms, and then any other tasks that the sergeant happened to come up with, I could get it done without me having to do it. Oh, so that's the good and the bad of my military boot camp. With the exception of one particular time when during one of our military inspections by our Marine company commander over us U.S. Air Naval Reserve recruits. When on the parade grounds, we had all marched over, came to attention, and the company commander came over to me, and he snatched the M1 rifle out of my hand. I didn't happen to have the chamber completely in place, and when they grab those M1 rifles out of your hand, they put their thumb right there in the opening, and it snapped shut on his finger. Now, being a Marine officer, well, he couldn't show pain. He couldn't show a whole lot of emotion, but you could tell he was not very well pleased. And he took that piece rifle and threw it to the sergeant major and said, "Handle it, Sergeant." And the company commander then came to attention, saluted the troops, and marched off the parade grounds. The sergeant major turned to me and said, "Entree!" And he threw the piece at me. And he said, "Hold that piece over your head, boy, and you start running around all over the parade grounds, one end to the other, until I tell you to stop. You understand, maggot?" To which I came to attention and I said, "Yes, sir, Sergeant Major. Yes, sir." I took the M1 rifle, which is known as a piece. I started running. I looked over my shoulder. Another maggot in my unit took my place and marched the squadron around while I ran, and I ran, and I ran, holding that piece above my head. Then eventually the sergeant major would stop the squad. He turned to me and he said, "Entree! How much does that piece weigh, boy?" To which I replied, 9.5 pounds, Sergeant Major." To which he replied, "That's not enough. Keep running. Get that piece up, maggot. Get that piece up." The rest of the squad, they stayed at attention. Maggot Squad B was dismissed, and I kept running and running. And we went through this same procedure several more times. Each time, the sergeant major asked me, "How much does that piece weigh, maggot?" With me replying, 9.5 pounds, sir. And him saying, "That's not enough." And he had me continue over and over, until one time he asked me, "Entree, how much does that piece weigh, maggot?" To which I replied, "How much you want it to weigh, you mother maggot?" Well, the squad fell apart with laughter. The sergeant major had steam coming out of his ears. He called the squad to attention, and he told them they were dismissed to the barracks. He turned to me, and he looked me square in the eyes. "All right, maggot. You start running, and I want that piece held high until I turn and tell you to stop." I looked at him and said, "Yes, sir, Sergeant Maggot." Why can't we learn? That's part of the process. Well, he told me to continue running with that piece held high until I turned into a fly and could fly away, and he would never have to see me again. And at that point, he turned and marched off the parade grounds into the darkness. And this darkness was descending upon the parade grounds, and I was running round and around the square, one side to the other, one side to the other. Well, it got dark. I did not turn into a fly. I did not fly away. And I was determined he would not get the best of me. But I was so tired. My arms were aching. That rifle, uh-oh, that's what comes to your mind. Rifle. Let me explain something. During basic training, naval and military recruits specifically referred to the M1 rifle as their piece. Drill instructors strictly conditioned them never to call it a gun. Under certain circumstances, you could say rifle. But for us maggots, it was a piece. And the famous Marine Corps Rifleman's Creed opens with, "This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine." I learned that. Well, there I was. Tired, alone, wondering, how long am I going to have to do this? But I noticed out of the corner of my eye, someone was approaching. I kept running. They came to the side of the parade grounds and stopped. And I ran around, and finally I came to where they were at. And that's when I saw it was the company commander. He had come back to the parade grounds, and he gave me permission to stop running. The company commander simply said, "Autry, you can stop running. Put that piece down, boy." I looked at him like, what am I supposed to do now? He kind of came to attention himself. And he said, "Autry, you are correct. The M1 rifle weighs exactly 9.5 pounds. Dismissed." And I went back to the barracks. Everything was quiet. I took a shower, got on the bed, and I started thinking, I could have avoided all of this just by following the instructions. After all, if I found myself overseas, those instructions could save my life, or my obstinance could get not only myself, but one of my squad members killed as well. You see, underneath all the joking, there's another side to this story. We were all young and scared because every one of us knew why America was building up the military personnel. One reason, and one reason only: Vietnam. Some of those boys standing beside me in formation would eventually go overseas. Some would come home changed forever. And some American families would receive the worst knock on the door imaginable. That's why Memorial Day matters. It's not just a 3-day weekend, folks. It's not just hamburgers and boat rides. It's not sales at the department stores. It should be a sacred reminder that freedom has always carried a price. And tonight, from this old rocking chair, I simply want to say thank you. Thank you to every veteran, every reservist, every military family, every mother who waited, every wife who prayed, and every father who stood silently proud. Every young man or woman who raised their right hand and said, "I'll serve," and especially to those who gave the supreme sacrifice so the rest of us could enjoy the freedoms we so often take for granted. America remembers you on this day, and we honor you. You know, freedom is never truly free. Some paid for it with years away from home. Some paid with wounds nobody could see. And some, yes, some paid for it with their lives. So on this Memorial Day, may we never forget the cost of liberty. And may we thank God for every brave soul who stood in the gap to protect this nation. That, my friends, is what being in the U.S. military is all about. Being free and serving so that others are free as well. I never had to go to Vietnam. I spent my time in the military in the reserves. Never got stationed anywhere else other than NES Atlanta. And for that, I praise God. But I also know there's many that went and never came home. Well, my friends, the porch light is getting dim tonight. And this old rocking chair has about run out of stories for another evening. But before we go, if you see a veteran this Memorial Day, shake their hand. Tell them thank you. And remember those who never got the chance to grow old sitting in a rocking chair like this one. From my back porch here in beautiful Savannah, Georgia on Betz Creek, this is Bobby Autry saying, God bless our veterans. God bless the families who sacrificed. And God bless America. Thanks for dropping by tonight. Don't forget to hit like to keep this going. And I would love to hear from you at the email given above. And to make things simple for finding future stories, simply hit the subscribe button on the YouTube button down below. God bless you. Until next time, remember, here on the back porch, there's always room for one more.